All right, okay, moving along. So basically, reporting agencies such as your own tribe will submit air quality data to AQS as we mentioned as formatted coded transactions. So each federally recognized tribe will have their own AQS tribal code. We'll talk about how to upload data into AQS in webinar 2. But before we do that, it's good to understand some basic common AQS codes required to load data to AQS. These include the AQS site ID codes, parameter codes, parameter occurrence codes, method codes, reporting unit codes, and AQS reporting duration codes. I will go through and talk about these common codes, and if you're interested, there's also a link of codes and tables available, as I mentioned, on EPA's AQS code list website. The link was shared earlier in the AQS code slide, along with the link to the AQS coding manual for your reference. So code values are also available as drop-down lists at each field within AQS where they are used. So I will show examples of this as I explain each code. So there are 4 general types of values to code air quality transactions. These are codes, of course, dates, numeric data, and alphanumeric data, which are characters that are either a letter or a number. Again, many types of coded transactions are used to provide site, monitor, and data information to the AQS database. So we'll begin with site identification code. So before selecting an AQS site ID for your monitoring site, I would recommend that you reach out to your AQS regional rep or contact and just notify them that you are a tribal user, provide them with your tribal affiliation or your tribal name and also your tribal code. This is helpful to do when you initially set up a monitoring site and are going to select a site ID. Again, at the end of the presentation, we'll have a resource slide that has a list of all the AQS regional contacts. So in regards to a site ID, according to the AQS data coding manual, your site ID has to be a numeric 4-digit number with that uniquely identifies each air monitoring site within a county or tribal area. There's no requirement that the site IDs be assigned continuously or any particular order. You know, tribes, you guys are free to allocate your site ID numbers in any way that you choose, as long as they're, and keep this in mind, as long as there's no duplication within a county and tribal area. So this is why it's important to touch base with your regional AQS rep to avoid duplication. For tribal sites, because tribal areas may cross along several state boundaries, so care must be taken to ensure that the site ID is unique to that affected tribal area and state county. In other words, when a new site ID is assigned in AQS, it must be different from any other site ID already existing for that combination of state and county or tribal code. So I'll give an example here. This is what the AQS database basic site data block looks like, where you can find the field for site ID and tribal code. Keep in mind, as you see in the lower right-hand corner from the drop-down list, that some site IDs may have already been established for that particular state and county, so you don't want to duplicate. But if anything, I think AQS will kick you like an error message saying that the site ID already exists. So just be sure to touch base with your regional AQS rep to verify and confirm you're choosing a site ID. Again, shout out to Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin. This is an issue that Matt Malamenek and I encountered when we were establishing a site there on their res. All right, moving on to AQS parameter codes. This refers to the code assigned to the parameter to be measured by the monitor. And thanks, Chris, for clarifying monitor and samplers and monitors being a specific parameter being reported. that was confusing at first for me as well. So by parameter, we mean this may be the pollutant that's being measured or the non-pollutant that's being measured. So an example of a parameter code is 88101. This is the parameter code for PM 2.5 measured at local conditions. And you see parameter code of 61101. This is the parameter code for wind speed measurements. So you got a pollutant and a non-pollutant parameter codes here. Again, this is an alphanumeric 5-digit code, meaning it can contain a letter and or a numeric value. When establishing and monitoring AQS, this is a mandatory code to have. And also this is considered a key field in AQS, which means that this field is used to uniquely identify specific data within the database. All right, So this is what the AQS database maintain monitor block looks like, where you can find the parameter code listing. As you can see from the drop-down list, there are numerous parameter codes for pollutants and non-pollutants. All right, AQS Parameter Occurrence Codes. So this code is also referred to as POC for short. It's used to distinguish between multiple monitors at the same site that are measuring the same parameter. I gave an example here. So the first monitor established to measure carbon monoxide at a site could have a POC of 1. If an additional monitor were established at the same site to measure carbon monoxide or CO, that monitor would have a POC of 2. But however, if a new instrument is installed to replace the original instrument used as the first monitor, that could be considered the same monitor, and it would still have a POC of 1. Again, some more attributes. This is a numeric 2-digit ID and is both mandatory and a key field. Also, numbers do not need to be assigned sequentially, as Chris had mentioned earlier. Again, in AQ, this is what the maintain monitor block looks like, where you can find the POC code. All right, AQS method codes. This code identifies a particular method for collecting and analyzing samples of the monitor's parameter. An example would be method code 098, which corresponds with an RNP, and that's old school, but right now, I guess now they're called thermoscientific method, scientific model 2000 particle air sampler, which uses a Teflon filter to collect particulate matter that are then sent to a gravity laboratory for analysis to determine total weight of particulates deposited onto the filter. Looking down again, another example would be method code 087, which corresponds to an instrumental or gaseous analyzer that uses ultraviolet absorption through law to detect and measure ozone molecules in the air. Attributes for this code, again, is it's a alphanumeric 3-digit code and it's mandatory. Within the AQS maintain monitor block, you will find a drop-down list of method codes. As you can see from the drop-down list, there's a numerous number of method codes for both pollutants and non-pollutants. All right, AQS reporting unit codes. This code identifies the pollutant concentration or parameter reading is expressed. In other words, the unit of measure associated with the reported concentration, mass, or flow value. So these units can be per volume of air or micrograms per cubic meter of air for gaseous or particulate pollutants, or even liters per minute for flow rate, or miles per hour for wind speed. Again, attributes include that it's an alphanumeric 3-digit code and it's mandatory. So in the AQS data monitor block, again, you can find a drop-down list of reporting unit codes. As you can see from the drop-down list, there are several unit codes depending on the parameter being reported. In this case, it looks through the units available for zone measurements. And lastly, AQS reporting durations. So duration codes. These codes are used to identify the period of time during which a sample value was collected. Typically, this is a 1-hour interval or 24-hour intervals. Again, this is an alphanumeric 1-character code and it's mandatory. And there's an example within the maintain monitor block again of 2 types of duration codes. 1 for 1 hour, 7 for 24 hour. Okay, so this is examples of commonly used codes. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but I just want to share some commonly used codes that are used to parameterize air quality data. Demonstration of AQS coding. This is the pipe delimited format. Again, here's an example of AQS coding using the pipe delimited format. Highlighted in red are the basic AQS codes that we just covered in this presentation. As you can see, we have the site and tribal code for the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin. Also included in the tribe's parameter code for PM 2.5, POC code of 2, as this is a co-located site, and method code for filter-based gravimetric measurements. Also included, as you can see, is the reporting unit code, which for PM2.5 measurements is expressed in micrograms per cubic meter of air. So that's how the pipe delimited format looks again, and how it's broken down into each code for reporting. In this case, it's raw data transaction.